All right, the last video I'm going to make for this section covers the idea of closing costs. So when you buy a house and you take out a loan, there's going to be a day, they call it closing, where you kind of settle up with the buyer. And usually you have a lawyer present and you have to pay a whole bunch of stuff. So I just wanted to do a little bit about that. So these expenses at closing can be pretty significant, okay? And you'll have these expenses whether you get a fixed rate or an adjustable rate mortgage. And they're paid right there at the start when the mortgage is set up, okay? So they're oftentimes called closing costs or settlement charges, okay? So the closing or the settlement occurs when all the details of the loan and all of that have been figured out and all the contracts have been signed. So here's an example. So here's a person who took out an $85,000 mortgage. These were the closing costs that the borrower was charged. So these typically go, the buyer would pay these, and then these usually go to the person, to the company that's handling getting the title insurance and all of that, and they pass on some of this to those companies that are doing the title insurance and that kind of thing, where they go and they pay for your deed to be recorded at the courthouse, okay? All right, and then like the broker that's you're using to get your loan, they might charge a fee. Now there's going to be some additional charges to even these that aren't indicated here, like if I hire a lawyer to come with me to the closing, then I've got to pay the lawyer, right? I also got to pay for my the realtor. Sometimes those fees are involved in here in the closing cost. Okay, so for this particular one, let's just go ahead and work through it. So the closing costs are all listed out. So it's easy to see that we could just add all these up, this part. All right, so the 1640 and all of that we would add up. But what we need is we need to know what this loan origination fee is all about. And then we can add that in as well. So loan origination fee, that's also talked about down here. Those are sometimes referred to as points. And each point actually is 1% of the mortgage amount. So these points that are sometimes negotiated and paid up front can enable the lender to raise the interest rate without your monthly payment changing, because you're paying some of that interest up front, really. You're paying that point at closing. All right, so if the loan origination fee is 1% of the mortgage, or if the points are 1% of the mortgage, that means you take 1% of, you multiply 0.01 times the mortgage amount. So that would be the $85,000, okay? So when you do that, you take that $85,000 and you multiply by 0.01, you get $850. And so then we're going to add that $850 and all the rest of this up, okay? I'm doing that now. I'm adding up all of those amounts. And, you know, they can vary very widely from this. This is just an example of some of them. And so that turns out to all of that. let me move where I put that. So the 1%, the 850 came from that. And then when I added the 850 and all the rest of the charges, I wound up with $3,705. Those would be my closing costs, okay? All right, now, I also wanted to just mention that at the closing, you also will, I didn't write it in there, did I? Okay, I wanted to mention it. That at closing, you usually also have to have your down payment, okay? So the total you need, you know, to have available at closing I'm just going to jot that down over here. You will also need to pay your down payment, bring your down payment at closing. And that down payment a lot of times is a lot, because you might put 20% down. So 20% of 85,000, you know, if my down payment was 20%, oh, it wouldn't be of the 85, but if it was 20% of the purchase price of the house, that's a significant chunk of money that I would need to bring. So again, it really wouldn't be 20% of the 85. It'd be 20% of, if I were wanting to put down a down payment of 20%, it would be of the purchase price of the house, but then that would be settled up. That would be brought to closing. Okay. All right, and then I also wanted to mention these other things you need to consider that can impact how much it really costs you to buy a house and to then have a house. So most of us just worry about trying to accumulate enough money to make a down payment, making sure we have a good credit rating, and that we make enough income that the bank is going to actually be willing to loan us money, and that we need to feel like we make enough money to make those regular monthly mortgage payments. Okay? But something else to think about is you're going to need to pay property taxes. Okay? All right, so the property taxes, sometimes you'll have city taxes, and then you're also within a county, so you'll have the county taxes, and then you're also within a state, so you might have, you know, taxes that are state related. Okay, property taxes are typically city and county. All right, now the property taxes and also the interest that you pay on your mortgage, those things are deductible when you do your income taxes, so that helps a little bit there. All right, another thing you need, usually the bank is going to require that you carry homeowners insurance, because when you buy a house, you're really just putting a little bit of money down, but most of what is owed, the bank is the one who came up with all of that, right? So you really don't own your house yet. You still have to pay it off. So the bank is going to want you to carry homeowners insurance so that if anything were to happen to your house, they would be able to get their money back out. Okay, so that can be a significant cost. And then homes also require a lot of maintenance. Like my son, his roof just failed. So he's got to now, he just bought the house recently, but he's got to figure out how to come up with enough money to get his roof redone. And there was also damage on the inside, right? All right, so those are other considerations to think about. All right, so here's a type of question that you might be asked. Okay, so here we have someone who has a 25-year, $175,000 fixed rate loan at 7% interest. And then they also are going to owe $2,800 in taxes a year, and then $750 for their homeowners insurance for the year. And so want to think about what their net average monthly expenditure would wind up being. So the first part of it you're going to do is like those problems I did in the very first video. 25 years, you're going to think about the 25 years with the 7%. Okay, that's in the table. So go to the table, okay, and get the factor that corresponds to 25 and 7. Okay, so I'm going back here. Where is that table? There it is. Go to 25 and 7. So I'm pulling that factor. Here's the 7, here's the 25. Okay, and remember that factor, that 7.06, let me get it written down. That's 7.06779. That's how much you would have to pay every month for those 25 years if the mortgage were just $100,000, but it's $175,000, right? So I have to multiply by 175, the number of thousands I have. All right, so when I do that, that's going to give me my monthly mortgage payment, okay? But in addition to that, we're being asked to consider the fact that we got to pay $2,800 in taxes in a year and also pay $750 in homeowners insurance. So I'm going to add those two together to see the total yearly expense coming from the taxes and the insurance. But then I really want it just to be a monthly thing. So I'm going to take that and divide it by 12 so I can plan for this. You know, we did this with our budgets earlier. I'm going to take that and divide by 12. Actually, I was just thinking about the budget part. That was in a different class. So I'm going to divide that by 12, and that gives me around $295.83. So if I were budgeting, I'd want to think about how I'd also need to plan for that amount. So I have my mortgage payment, that $1,236.86, together with my taxes and insurance, which would be $295.83. So my net average monthly expenditure would really turn out to be $1,532.69. Okay? So this is your taxes and insurance here. And this is the monthly mortgage payment. Oops, trying to write the word payment.